Je donne la parole à Monsieur Lefhoko, Kesamang, fonctionnaire principal chargé du bien-être social à la Commission de l'Union africaine pour faire sa présentation. Monsieur, vous avez la parole. You have the floor, please. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. President and honorable members. As mentioned, my name is Lefhoko Kesamang from the African Union Commission, the Department of Social Affairs, and I'm a focal person for disability and aging programs of the AU in Africa, as well as taking care of social protection, social security, and social policy. Currently, I will just be connecting these beautiful consultations and this beautiful draft disability model law with what the other policies and other programs as well as treaties of the African Union are saying regarding persons with disability. And I'm also going to try to be very brief because we are almost getting to the end of the part of the morning towards lunch. Now, let me make mention of the fact that the draft disability model law is very, very critical for the advancement of the rights of persons with disabilities in Africa. And Mr. President, allow me to also mention that it is also founded, it is also going to help what we call the African Union Disability Architecture, which is in short AUDA. I'm very much aware that there is a new AUDA that is coming up, and which is going to be the African Union, change the name of the NEPAD into an implementation, structure of the African Union. So this AUDA or this architecture is founded on 3 pillars. The first pillar is the program, which is currently the African Union, the African Union program, or the African Union, the Continental Plan of Action to the African Decade of Persons with Disabilities, 2010 to 2019, is coming to an end. Therefore, already the ministers in April endorsed and recommended to the coming summit of a new policy program, which is going to be a framework, which is not going to be limited like the Continental Plan of Action. The second pillar is the protocol or the legal arm, which is the African Union Disability Protocol, or in detail, is the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of persons with disabilities in Africa. And I'll just mention a little about it later. And also the institute, which is the African Union Disability Institute, or in short, AUDI, which is of course the nomenclature of the German car. This institute is still under planning. It is going to be in the future be adopted by be hosted by one of the member states. We are still in the establishment stage of it. Having said this, let me mention that because of the end of this decade, a review was made on the implementation of the decade plan of action. And it was found out that, of course, quite a number of member states are doing very well. Let me just applaud the member states who are represented here. There's a lot in the area of disability that is taking place in Africa, and it is commendable. We need to appreciate what Africa is doing. Actually, some of the research is showing that representation of political leaders with a disability are more in Africa than anywhere in the world, which is something commendable. I mean, when we look at ourselves, sometimes we look down upon ourselves. And let me also mention that a questionnaire was sent to member states, Mr. President, about 3 years ago, and only 33 member states out of the 55 responded to that questionnaire. And the Ministers of Social Development, Labour and Employment, during their STC in April, they emphasized that the other 22 who didn't respond to how they are implementing disability policies and treaties of the Union should also be given an opportunity to respond. And I want to believe that that opportunity is going to be afforded. And there were a few challenges that, there were quite a number of challenges that were identified, but I'll just mention about 3 of them. There is a wide gap between policy and practice, which is found there, that, policy is very clear and practice is something else. But however, this is something that has been recommended to be improved. And the issue of budget, that there is need for budget, Mr. President, regarding disability in Africa. And I've already mentioned that some of the things here. And also that there were recommendations which were made, and I'll just mention but a few. There should be a shared understanding of disability. Disability is still a debatable issue in Africa, of course across the world. However, Mr. President and honorable members here, we need, as the African Union, having to have a standardized way of understanding disability. Even the language, etc. I was listening to my dear interpreters saying that people living with disability. In one area, I think it was in Namibia, they really complained that they don't live with disability. They live with their families, they live with their wives, they live with their children. So they are people with disability. So you can see how political it is. And also to realize that it is very, very important to conduct research on disability in Africa, so that our motions in Parliament, so that our programs and our projects are informed by well-researched data and decisions. And the other one is that as the recommendation is that as members and as Parliament, our organizations of persons with disability needs to be strengthened, and also that a universal design should be number one a decision that we need to take in our parliaments, meaning that every building, whether it's a road, it should be user-friendly for everyone, including persons with disability, without having to put up beautiful buildings like this, and then we have to spend another $1 million, if not rent, to work on it. The other part that I also want to talk about is the ratification of the protocol. Let me just take a minute, Mr. President, with your permission, just to say that the protocol to the African Charter on Human People's Rights on the rights of persons with disability has only been signed by 3 countries. The first country was the Republic of the Central African Republic, and the second country is the Republic of Burkina Faso, and the third country just a few days back, the Republic of South Africa. We have not have any ratification, it's only the signing, and it was adopted by heads of state in January 2018, and it's very, very important for us, members of parliament here through you, Mr. President, that we take this protocol and ratify it. We need only 15 signatures, signatures and ratifications. And I believe that by the time we leave this session, we will be able to go to our parliaments and really address this protocol. It's very important because Africa is moving forward. For the implementation of Agenda 2063 and its realization, we need also to take along other vulnerable groups, in this case persons with disabilities. And looking forward and looking where we are with Agenda 2063 and what we want to be as Africa and how we want Africa to be without being influenced by people from outside. My appeal is that let us ratify our own legal instruments and treaties, so that we should not be disadvantaged or be controlled by our former masters. And also the other protocol, of course, let me just take this advantage, is the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the rights of older persons in Africa, which was adopted by heads of state in 2016. And so far, only 10 member states have signed. And amongst those 10 member states, gratefully is the Kingdom of Lesotho, which has ratified. And we need to applaud the Kingdom of Lesotho for even taking the lead. And I want to believe that all of us here, we will ratify it and become 15 member states, and therefore it becomes into force. And these are part of the vulnerable groups that I'm dealing with. And it is very, very important for us realizing the Africa we want and making sure that no one is left behind, and nothing should be done for vulnerable groups without their intervention. This is the pride we should be taking, and I have no doubt that Africa is proud of what it is, for we are all Africans. And let me also just come to the last part of the recommendations, that funding and working with the organization of persons with disability, it is very, very important. And it has shown that it makes a very big difference when organizations of persons with disabilities are involved. And I'm looking forward to our parliament having a very high significance of persons with disabilities. I'm looking forward to our parliament having a high significance of members of parliament who are women with disabilities. And it is we are moving in the right direction. It's just a matter of signing this and ratifying this protocol. Lastly, let me just mention one instrument that is coming, which is the Draft African Union Disability Strategic Framework, which is replacing the Continental Plan of Action. I'm not going to say much on it because of time, Mr. President. That to say that as soon as this model law is adopted and is taken through all the processes, it is going to help in the implementation of the protocol, as well as the strategic plan of action, the strategic framework on disability in Africa. Because Parliament, it will be easier for parliaments, various parliaments in our 54 member states to be able to implement this protocol, as well as to be able to implement this strategic framework. The strategic framework is going to be considered by an extraordinary STC on social development, labor and employment sometime in December, because it was not finalized in April. So in a nutshell, let me end by saying, for the model law, which you are working on, and you are putting a lot of money into, Mr. President, for it to find face, these two instruments are very, very critical. And as the department, we are looking forward to the finalization of this model law, and we are so proud that our own parliament is looking at this, and it is going to bring it to us to ensure that then we guide our implementation of our policies and treaties for the Africa that we want and for who we want to be. Thank you, Mr. President.